This was one of my biggest illustrations in 2020. It took me a week to create it. This illustration, while old, still means a lot to me, so I thought it'd be fun to share the process behind it, what inspired it, and what I learned along the way. It's the Lily Factor! Ding! In 2020, I was determined to learn to draw backgrounds, so I created a prompt list of singular words that could spark ideas of environments I could create and procreate. While I barely touched on every prompt in that list, I did have these first two drawings, one of which was based on the prompt Serenity, and the other based on the word industrial. It was helpful of thinking of how to create environments that I could title with just one word. It was also interesting that while I didn't draw every environment based off of the prompts, I did think a lot about environments I could create based on those words, one of which actually inspired a whole new world and cast of characters for a short film. So having that in mind helped in preparation for this illustration. This was during the dawn of COVID in 2020. Ugh. I worked on this drawing in July. At the time, my family and I were determined to at least get outside for a walk every day, but it was also getting to be kind of a rainy season. And just sitting in my room a lot of the time, staring at the window, seeing the rain coming down, it just made me want to create an illustration that matched that gloomy, rainy feeling. But with a glimmer of hope, where there's a little bit of sun peeking out to the left of the illustration. I don't know about you, but when it's summertime and it is dark, thunderstorm, rainy, I love it when there's just this moment where the sun powers through the clouds and it looks like a normal sunny day, but it's pouring down rain. It's that light in the darkness hope. Hence the singular word for this illustration being optimism. Funny side story, myself and other students were paid to take this online math course over the summer to see if it could actually teach students math. So we would get on Zoom calls with an instructor and just rip apart this program and see who was teaching who better. But I remember I had a question about a typo on one of the equations and I was screen sharing and they could see this drawing on one of my tabs. Oh, was I embarrassed by the colors. If only they had known I'd eventually layer blue on top of the character, lighten its opacity, and then softly erase it to unite all of those colors. At the time, I was avidly studying speed paints of artists I knew, trying to figure out how on earth they did digital art, how I could do what they did. So I'd even slow down their speed paints as much as I could to figure out what they were doing. That's when I would see blue layered over a character, or orange, and then suddenly this soft shading began. So I started to figure out what other artists were doing, and I tackled it with this drawing, starting first with the blue for soft shading, then some orange to saturate it, which then eliminated that unfortunate base color scheme. It was just a little too loud. And I had fun taking my time drawing all of those details on the character's clothing and accessories. Just a few months after I made this illustration, I saw in the window display of a store right across from where I take violin lessons an umbrella that looked just like this character's umbrella. I was like, hey, I'm ahead of the trend. Maybe I could dress as my own character. I also learned the hard way that if you spend too much time in Procreate, it will glitch out on you. So I remember drawing the details on this skirt, and then this random line appeared out of nowhere, and despite hitting the undo button several times, it wouldn't go away, so I just had to manually erase it. Procreate's not that glitchy. I had just been working on that drawing for too many hours straight at that point in time. I remember the week of making this drawing so well. Get up early in the morning, go on a walk with my parents, then I'd do this math course, and then after that, I would work for several hours on this drawing. And this went on for a week. I was so new to digital art that I was taking the long route for everything in this drawing, but had I not, I wouldn't have learned so much. Challenging myself with this illustration broadened my drawing skills and made me more confident in my digital art ability. And I was even learning to try my own things. Even after doing the blue and orange soft shading, I eventually went over the character with other different colors to make her just feel a little more lively. Because you can use that soft shading technique, but sometimes you might want to introduce other colors. Otherwise, it gets too zoned into one color. But because I used the soft shading technique, I was able to use the same color for shading in everything else in the background, which actually helped tie all of the colors into the illustration. So by the end of it, you see a color harmony in the sense that the colors the character's wearing on her outfit appear elsewhere in the background, and it just unites everything together. Oh, I remember painstakingly shading those circles on that crosswalk. Oof. I do want to go back to the math course though. Just set a disclaimer here. I'm not good at math. That program was to see if they could teach people math. So I was beta testing, but not because I was impressive or anything. No. Polynomial factoring equations? Pfft, forget it. Sine, cosine, and tangent makes me want to tuck and roll out of geometry class. Speaking of wanting to tuck and roll out of here, that car was my nightmare. I made the mistake of making the blue base color for the car way too dark, which made it impossible to shade. It was also a pain to have to recolor the base color of that blue to make it lighter, because I was not layer smart. This is something that you eventually get good at with digital art, but when you start out, you either abuse the amount of layers you can create, or you underuse the amount of layers you can create, or you're just dumb with what you put on your layers. And that would have been me at this time, because I put a shadow right on top of the shaded version of the sidewalk. And because I have two separate layers for those sidewalks, you can see there's a line in the middle, and when that should just be one sidewalk, because they were on two separate layers. So I eventually have to combine them. But I also had to erase around the shading where I put the shadow for the crosswalk sign. This is complicated to explain, and let me tell you, it was even more complicated in real life. Oh, it was a nightmare to fix that thing. So the best advice I can give to beginner digital artists is become layer smart. It won't come instantly, but you have to try. Now, in hindsight, a lot of these issues, instead of having to wrangle the layers to figure things out, I very well could have just painted right on top of the problems, especially that blue car there. I could have just painted over that if I wanted to. But I didn't know about digital painting as much at the time, which is why I approached it in such a soft-shaded digital drawing kind of way. This was even back in the day where I actually individually colored line art on the character, but thank goodness I now know a shortcut for that. Although I will say it was good to do that for the rain jacket and umbrella, since those were both transparent. As I wrapped up the illustration, I added reflections to the city buildings, added some puddles, some texture to make a more gravelly road, and by this point in time I had added so much detail I just frankly gave up when it came to drawing in the raindrops. So I just kind of pasted them in, added a few bouncing off of the sidewalk, and called it done. Now to dissect my layers. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce to you what not to do. But yeah, you can see what the illustration looks like without the character, without the shading on the crosswalk sign, different things like that, just to kind of see how I had very chaotic, disorganized layers at this time. This illustration taught me so much. I had to collect a plethora of reference photos to learn how to draw crosswalks and vehicles. It taught me so much about digital art as well, which is why it's one of my biggest illustrations of 2020. I'd like to thank you all for watching. May God bless you in your life and your art. Bye!